Hello everybody, this is ManuS and I'm back with the second artifact starter deck, the blue-black control deck. People seem to have really liked the first series and especially the games. I myself was very impressed with how cool the games are in this game and were in the video, so we'll hopefully have 3 more of these awesome games with this other deck, which looks arguably worse and weaker than the other one, but we'll see how we will do with it. But let's go over it first. Alright, this is the deck. So first off, we have the heroes. The black basic hero, Debbie the Cunning, aka Riley the Cunning, aka Debbie the Cunning. She went through quite a bunch of name changes. Initially she was Debbie, then they quickly renamed her to Riley, which kind of makes sense because Debbie is a bit of a ridiculous name. But people really like Debbie so much that, yeah, they brought back Debbie because people like Sir Action Slacks have been campaigning for Riley the Cunning to become Debbie again, and apparently succeeded. Valve is listening to their player base apparently, so that's nice. But yeah, Debbie the Cunning is a decent hero. She's 9/5 against other heroes, so she trades with a lot of heroes, kills the smaller heroes without dying, like all the 3 and 4 or even 2 attack heroes, although most of the 4 attack heroes are 4/10s, so they just kind of like hit each other to 1 and then trade the next turn. But yeah, she is pretty solid, her card is pretty solid, like her ability just gives her a +1 attack against creeps and heroes, but against towers she just does 7. She's kind of like a bad Phantom Assassin. But if you look at it, like most basic heroes are like a bad version of a good a worse version of a good hero of that color. Like Farven is a bad version of Treant Protector. Debbie is a bad version of Phantom Assassin. Keefe the Bold is a bad version of Axe, and so on. Not quite sure who the blue basic hero is necessarily a bad version of, but yeah, he's kind of like still weaker than the other blue heroes. Her card is nothing spectacular, but pretty solid. Like I like it better than most of the other basic cards. It's actually, I think, the best or second best signature card of any of the basic heroes. Not sure if Battlefield Control is better or not. Kind of hard to tell for me now, but No Accident is like top 1 or top 2 of basic hero signature cards, if you ask me. I really don't like. I think the red one is very bad, and the green one is pretty bad too. But yeah, the heroes are better, so all kind of balances out. So yeah, you get to deal 3 damage to unit. Just some nice way to control the board a bit and finish off stuff. Then we have Necrophos. Pretty weak hero, 5/6 means he dies to a lot of stuff and only trades with like the smallest of heroes. And even with a lot of the small heroes, he only like trades over 2 turns, unless it's like really the 5 health heroes like Crystal Maiden or Prelix. That are the ones he kills, and he like kind of stares at a bunch of the high health, low attack units. But yeah, most heroes have 3 or more attacks, so they kill him over 2 turns, so they get best trades or just gets eaten. Pretty weak hero to deploy, but it's not like the deck has particularly great options to deploy. You basically have to hope he doesn't match a hero on the flop, and then if he does, maybe try and do something about it with Battlefield Control and that sort of stuff. Although you usually can't use stuff like Battlefield Control in the first turn, so if it happens on the first turn, you kind of just a sitting duck. His ability is he gains +1 health after an enemy neighbor dies, so he becomes more durable over time, but on the flop he's pretty weak. His signature card, not too great in my opinion, but not as bad as it seemed to me on first sight. You modify a black hero with deal 2 piercing damage to this hero's enemy neighbors before the action phase. So the thing is, this has a delayed impact, and also if your heroes are all kinda weak, it's a bit tricky to get value out of it next turn if your hero is already dead. So it takes some time till it gets into action. It also costs 4, so it's not cheap, but it can be kind of nasty, especially because if your hero dies at the beginning of the action phase rather than in combat the turn before, it's basically taken out of the game for 2 turns rather than 1. That's like the one thing that I noticed about these before the action phase effects. If they kill a hero, it's like twice as bad if they normally die. So actually, if you can make it so your hero dies in combat rather than before the next action phase, just make sure you get it dead right away rather than let it die. Like, don't make the mistake to heal it so that it just dies at the beginning of the action phase anyway, and then you're even worse off. Okay, so next we have Skywrath Mage. That's a pretty good one. Like, his stats, obviously he's a blue hero, so his stats are very weak. 3/6, dies to like basically every hero, gets one-shotted by most of them. So flopping him is pretty ambitious. A bit surprised that they didn't go for like the 7 or 8 health heroes first. Like, I personally would have probably flopped the 3/8, since his ability is only going to be active on turn 3 anyway, and if only your stats matter, might as well take the 3/8 rather than the 3/6. So that's a bit weird and doesn't make much sense to me, so I would recommend changing that if it was me, or at least change it, or even change it with Ogre Maggie. You lose 1 point of health, but if you have to use a blue spell early on, like a ventriloquy or battlefield advantage or relentless, well, it doesn't count for relentless zombie, but like if you have to use a blue spell early to protect your hero, like the battlefield control and ventriloquy, you have a 25% chance of getting them back. So that makes a whole lot of sense to me. So I would probably just deploy Skywrath Mage last, because if I'm not mistaken, the first time you can use him is on the river turn, on the 3rd turn. So since he's the weakest in stats, might as well deploy him just in time for his ability and not before that. That would be my guess here. So yeah, just probably flop the Ogre Maggie, turn what's his name? Turn Jemui, and then river Skywrath Mage rather than the other way around. They chose to do it here, which is a bit strange. And yeah, his card is really powerful. 12 damage divided among a unit and its allied neighbors. Keep in mind, if you use it on a unit without neighbors, it takes 12. If you use it on a unit that's like leftmost or rightmost of a lane, it splits 6 damage between the unit and its 1 neighbor. And if you just use it on a unit with 2 neighbors, they all 3 take 4 damage. So usually you want to use it on 2 units or even a single unit to nuke them, because for 4 damage you usually can't get a hero dead unless they are low, and then you can maybe take some creeps with him for free or soften up the lane or something for combat. And yeah, forgot to talk about his ability. His ability is Concussive Shot. You can use it every 2 turns. It gives a hero and its allied neighbors -2 armor this round. Great setup for his signature card, Mystic Flare, and other damage effects. Then we have the Ogre Maggie I talked about. His ability is, if you play a blue spell, you have a 25% chance to put a base copy of that card into your hand. I think it might have been 50% at some point, but I'm not sure. I thought I saw, when I saw the spoiler, it was 50%, but I'm not sure. So either I remember it wrong or they nerfed it because it ended up being too strong, which makes sense, because drawing half a card every time you play a blue spell seems super powerful. So wouldn't be surprised if they changed that if it was the other way before. 3/7, not great stats, but fine. The signature card is where it's at, basically. It's pretty good. Ignite, it deals 1 piercing damage to each enemy before the action phase. You can play it in any lane. So yeah, you usually can just use this to kind of wear down a lane and kind of make this lane very inhabitable for your opponent, especially if you start having multiples of these. So yeah, strong card, pretty good blue hero, not much else to say here. And then last but not least we have the basic hero, Jemui the Wise. He's a 3/8, fairly good stats for a blue hero, I would say. I think the only other one that has similar good stats is Luna, and Kana is the only one, I think, that has better stats at 212, being super durable. His ability is you get to draw a card every 4 turns, so the first time on turn 5, I think, if I'm not mistaken, because it starts on turn 4 or turn 5, I'm not 100% sure right now how they are counted from the beginning of the game, but I think it might be turn 5. Not sure. If it is turn 4, then that means Skywrath Mage is on turn 2, so you want to turn him rather than river him. And yeah, his signature card, Battlefield Control, choose a unit, choose a combat target for it. So some nice cheap utility that lets you control what happens in combat, which is actually pretty nice, and it's also very instrumental at keeping your weak blue heroes alive on bad flops by just making the opponent's hero attack the creep, if there is one, rather than the hero and killing it. So yeah, I think his signature card is pretty helpful and pretty decent for a signature card, especially compared to the green and red one that I mentioned. So yeah, not a terrible hero, not a great hero either, but one of the better basic heroes, I would say, all in all, for its color. Since the stats are pretty good for its color, the ability is decent, but marginal. It's kind of like Ogre Maggie. You draw like, considering you play like a blue spell every turn in the Ogre Maggie lane, you draw a card every 4 turns effectively. So do you with his ability, but here you get it guaranteed on the 4th turn, and there you might get it later or earlier or even more than one card. So it's higher variance but potentially stronger. So maybe Jemui is kind of considered a worse version of Ogre Maggie, not sure. Although his stats are better than Ogre Maggie, so normally the stats are kind of weaker than the better version that's non-basic. Yeah, so that's the heroes for the deck. Let's talk about the cards. We have the battlefield controls that we already talked about. Then we have one additional way of keeping your blue heroes alive early. Ventriloquy, choose a unit, it taunts. Kind of a different take on the battlefield control. It also lets you kill opposing heroes a bit easier because you can make all 3 allied neighbors attack that hero. You can make kind of one of your heroes tank everything and so on. Has a bunch of nice different applications than battlefield control. Then we have grazing shot. Yeah, ventriloquy is a 2-off, like most of the cards in the deck are 2-offs, other than the signature cards. Grazing shot, just deal 2 damage to a unit in any lane. Just kind of a cheap utility thing, finish off some stuff. Spend your mana efficiently and just keep things in control a bit. Then we have treble chase. Deal 2 piercing damage to the enemy tower before the action phase, another 2-off. An improvement you can play in any lane. It's a bit of a weird card in a control deck, because it's a fairly aggressive card. Not sure, maybe I'm just understanding the game not well enough yet, but this seems like a card that would be good in aggro, but doesn't make a whole lot of sense in control. Maybe it needs it as a way to win the game, because you're kind of just delaying and controlling your opponent while you're kind of dealing damage to them. Maybe that's how this deck is supposed to work. But yeah, a weird card choice for a controlling deck. Bringing me to the next weird card choice, another 2-off, Lightning Strike, another card that I would normally consider an aggressive card, dealing 6 damage to the enemy tower, finishing them off basically when you get stalled out and stuff, is something that I would consider an aggressive card. So not sure why it's in here. Maybe that's just how control kind of works in this game, or it's just kind of a weird bad starter deck concept. We will see how it plays later. Haven't really played with it yet. But yeah, in draft this is a card that I would put in like aggressive decks, if at all. Then we have Relentless Zombie. This is a bit different. You can kind of use it offensively and defensively. It jump blocks pretty well for like 2 turns, sticking around and bogging down an opponent. It can also just kind of be an annoying attacker, but it doesn't deal a lot of damage, so it's probably a bit more of a card that buys you time and controls combat a bit. Then we have Assassin's Apprentice. That's a bit more of an aggro and control kind of card, because it's pretty good at pressuring the opposing tower, and you can use it to finish off opposing units from the flank. So it kind of lets you control the board a bit with the flanking potential, while also being an early threat. Another card that I think is, yeah, very much an aggro card rather than a control card. So, but yeah, they called this blue-black control. I didn't make this name up. Yeah, it's a 4/2 for 2, not particularly controlling. It trades with a creep. So the thing that it does best basically is just pressure the tower, because you don't want to put it in front of a creep. Like a pretty bad trade to trade a card with a basic creep, and especially when it doesn't gain you a ton, especially early on, and it also doesn't trade with any heroes. So yeah, just kind of want to use this to pressure the tower. But maybe this is kind of an aggro control sort of deck where you kind of just control the board and delay your opponent while you deal as much direct damage to their tower as possible. But that doesn't seem like the greatest strategy with these cards and these colors, but we'll see how it plays. And yeah, like I said, another 2-off. Then we have Ignites. Next card, that's a controlling card. Your mini board sweeper dealing 2 damage to each enemy, basically killing half melee creeps, because they need 4 damage, so you can kind of finish off melee creeps that were hitting each other for a turn already, and maybe finish off heroes and stuff like that, or combine it with other cards. It's yeah, a pretty decent board control card, nothing fancy. 2 copies here. Then we have Iron 4 Goldmine, probably your early game bread and butter. Just kind of get that out early on, and then generate gold to get to your items. We'll look at what items we have at the end. And we have the No Accidents from Debbie. And then we have One Slay, that's the first one-off in the deck. Yeah, lets you condemn a creep. So if the opponent plays something big and nasty, you can just get rid of it for cheap. Your typical control card, creature removal. And we have Dimensional Portal, a card that's like very powerful and very universal. You can use it to be aggressive and take over a lane. You can use it defensive to defend a lane. Just a really good card. Then we have Foresight, another typical control card, also only a 2-off. Yeah, for 4 mana, draw 2 cards, not much to say here. Card advantage. One of the cards I would definitely be looking into getting the 3rd copy if you want to upgrade this deck somehow. Then Oclodi Vandal, another card that kind of goes with the yeah, aggro controlling theme, because it's definitely more of an aggressive card. 4/4 for 4 is pretty good stats. It kills 2 creeps, 1-shots, melee creeps right away, and deals 4 damage to the enemy tower, and then hits the tower for 4 a turn. Sorry about that. So yeah, another like base damage card. The deck seems to be really kind of aggro controlling the board while you damage the tower and kill them. I think that's one of the decks they used at PAX. And then, last but not least, we have the Mystic Flares from Skywrath Mage. So the curve is also really low. Not sure why this is considered a control deck. Like, it's so aggressive. It seems more like a aggro tempo kind of deck rather than a control deck. But we'll see how it plays. Definitely interesting. Yeah, items, we have 2 leather armor, 2 short sword, 2 traveler's cloak, 1 Stolehawk cloak, 1 broadsword, and 1 Keenfork musket. Nothing special here, but I would probably be looking to cut one of the leather armors for a traveler's cloak at the very least, because cloak is really good, armor is not very good, and you almost always want 3 cloak in most of your decks, like in all your draft decks basically, and even in yeah, your cheap constructed decks, and later when you have better items you probably want to play like Stonehall cloaks or something, like a good, fairly cheap alt item. And I think a fair share of constructed decks even will end up playing Traveler's Cloak if they don't generate that much gold, because it's just a very good way of keeping your heroes alive and making them more durable, especially when you're in colors like blue and black that are very squishy. So I don't get why there's only 2 copies. This should definitely be 3. These heroes desperately need health. Alright, that's the deck, and we'll be jumping into 3 casual global matchmaking games like last time, and play the deck a bunch and show it in action, and hopefully we can do well again. So one last thing before we hop into the games, make sure to subscribe down here if you haven't yet for more artifact content in the future, deck techs, news, stream highlights, limited stuff, all the things artifact. I really like the game and I plan on making a lot of content for it. Also, if you want to support this content, make sure to whitelist YouTube from your ad block to support the free content with ads. And now on to the games.